Um, Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Chaos Vantage webinar. We're starting, so grab a drink, make yourselves comfortable, and enjoy. I hope you're strapped in, since today we are going to talk about high-speed rendering and directing dynamic shots. My name is Simeon Balabanov, the product manager of Chaos Vantage, and I'm joined by Andrea Pedrotti, a talented artist and short films director who is currently working at Brick Visual, an amazing studio of longtime Chaos users. Andrea is here to talk about his latest short film called Spectrum. And Andrea has been a V-Ray user coming from an ArcViz background, but in his free time, he has been creating and directing short films outside the realm of architecture visualization, and Spectrum is a perfect example of his work. Hello, Andrea. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Simeon. Thank you, everybody. Hello. It's a pleasure to meet you, and it's a pleasure to show my work in this webinar. I would say that if you agree, maybe we can start watching it together and play the animation. Then we can start the presentation.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. I think we should be playing the video any moment now. So right, we'll play the video and we'll be right back. So okay, ladies and gentlemen, here is Spectrum. That was awesome. Before we continue, I'd like to request from the audience to ask any questions you might have using the chat box here in YouTube. I will take note of the questions and ask those during the Q&A session at the end. So, Andrea, could you walk us through your creative process and the way you came up with the idea?
Perfect. I would say that I'm gonna start sharing my screen, and then we can jump into Spectrum. Again, today I'm gonna present my work called Spectrum, and basically, I would like to mark down 2 milestones, why and how you can approach watching this with this animation. I would say that I did my animation in my free time, so I just took a lot of extra hours after work, from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. more or less. So uh, a bunch of evenings, I would say, and a bunch of weekends as well. And so it was just for pleasure, so not a commission sort of animation. And then I also started this animation with an idea that I wanted to portray something which is dynamic, and I was mainly focusing on directing this animation. So I I I reached a point where the textures and the details were already quite good from my perspective, and so I kept this animation on a concept level of detail,
Mhm.
not further than this. I also would like to highlight why I'm currently doing a bunch of personal projects. I would say that personal project in general, they're quite good tool to improve yourself, and also to express yourself. You don't have any inputs from clients. You don't have any inputs from others. You are just alone. You are trying to free ride with an idea, and you are also creating something which is cool, I would say. As for the
Yeah.
for my first animation that I did it in a bunch of months. It's called Icarus. And meanwhile, I was literally trying to portray something that I really loved, space, but at the same time, I was trying to learn a bunch of new software. So when I'm doing personal project, I'm always thinking, what can I learn? What can I take from it? And um, how can I express? everything that I have in my mind. And why an automotive personal project? Actually, I'm not like an automotive sort of like CG guy, uh, but I think that it was like a sort of like automatic choice for me. The car itself is a sort of like really fantastic character, hero character you can play with, and especially because I was looking to create something which is like pretty dynamic and fast and like impacting. I found that the car itself is really a fantastic hero character to play with, and because of that, I started this quick animation. I would like to schedule this presentation on three levels, on three categories of approach. One is going to be the very first one is going to be the idea and the ideas and the main goal that I try to highlight, and then the pre-production stage, which was kind of the biggest stage, probably, and then the very last one, which was the production, where everything was like uh, taking I mean, I was taking everything and was stealing like and collecting everything that I learned, that I studied, and then I put it together into the production, into the final animation that I did. Before doing that, before going through these main three categories, I would like to highlight one thing that I discovered. This is like a personal point of view that I would like to express. I thought that those 3 points that I mentioned earlier, they are creating a sort of like linear workflow. But while I'm doing personal project, the thing that I learned from my experience that I I prefer the most to have like a sort of like not non-linear approach, which is a sort of like going back and forward uh, workflow that allows me to sort of like going back, take a breath, rewatch what I did so far, and then re uh, question myself to make the thing that I try to think to do in a better way. So, and there's the reason why, for example, I think that the three categories that I mentioned, they kind of overlap each other in this my personal creative process. Starting from the ideas and main goal, this is the very early stage that for Spectrum. In this phase, which took a bunch of months, I was not already working on this. I was just like collecting ideas. So it's an undefined process, I would say. And I started this summer collecting suggestions. Uh, it's funny because this summer, as I was like re-listening a song that I really love from Justice called Genesis, and it's a music is a song that I discovered when I was younger, and I was like driving for the very first days my car, and when I listened to it, I imagined myself like shooting a movie or like a piece of video where those cars are like chasing each other, like starting from a traffic light signal, and it was like super intense. And this idea stayed in my mind for 4 years. And this summer, I also watched this animation called Redline. It's an animation which is portraying like cars in the future, and it's cool because it's portraying cars and movements in a really um, powerful and dynamic way. And these two kicks that I received with these two suggestions, like Genesis audio and Redline video, they started in my mind this engine of like trying to think about a new personal project, which is Spectrum, of course. And
Andrea,
yes,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I can't help but notice that you're using the word suggestions rather than references. And are you making any difference? Did you make difference between these two terms? Usually in the industry, people are gathering, references from mood boards, but you know, I noticed that you're using suggestions. Is there any reason behind that? Could you elaborate?
yeah, I think that everybody has his own like workflow and has his own like terminology, I would say, in words. For me, suggestions are different from references, but this is just like my point of view. Suggestions are like more something that you can like be that you can receive from video and audio contents in a way that you're like just watching it. It's something subtle in your mind in a way that you can rethink it and re-elaborate. So And when I started collecting suggestions, I was watching a lot of videos, trying to find out
Right, right.
I mean, little fantastic things that I was like catching by. And but after that, I'm using the reference itself to try to reshape and to be accurate on the shot. So suggestions in general, I define them as a something that I'm watching, and I'm stealing from them something, and then I'm using
Right.
references to try to elaborate what I have in my mind in the more accurate way. I don't know
Yep,
if
yep.
I answer to your question
It
properly.
makes sense. It makes sense. I think I get it now. Thanks.
Yeah, I would say that this is just like my point of view, and of course, I think that is not probably the best one, but it works for me. So I would
Of
say,
course, of course. But we're here to talk about your workflow. So uh, thanks for
uh,
clarifying.
thank you. And okay, so basically, talking about suggestions, I started thinking, okay, I want to do something about car, and but now I need to kind of enlarge my topic awareness. So I started watching tons of videos, and in different ways, or also different categories, I would say. So starting from movies, anime, or like advertisements, and this part was quite important because I was aware about the different styles, so cinema style, anime style, advertisement style, which are like completely different. And I discovered this in this like early stage. It was quite useful because I was kind of exploring the concept of the automotive, but in different ways. Then I started thinking spectrum, trying to also identify the main goal and the reason why I wanted to do this. I started from big, but then I reduced it to something which is like more manageable and smaller. And for this reason, I choose to direct just like a car sequence. And in my mind, the idea was, why don't I challenge myself in a way that maybe in the future some director is going to ask me, why don't you, Andrea, why you're not going to direct just like a piece of a movie where this guy is like escaping, where he's like accelerating and speeding up. And so I was like, okay, this is a from my side, instead of like starting from a big picture, I tried to portray just like a that little portion, but in a more accurate way. The time that I spent was like more or less 1 month, more 1 month and a half,
Mhm.
excluded the previous part that I mentioned, where I was just like randomly collecting ideas. And what I did was I directed, and I was also the camera operator and the sound designer of Spectrum. I know that a bunch of like really talented professionals and artists are outside, and I could have asked for any sort of help from the others. But from my point of view, I was kind of interested to see all the aspects of this project, and I tried to put myself in condition to test all of them, to be aware in the future about all these pieces coming together for the next future and bigger
Mhm.
projects. After this random stage where I was like collecting, and I received a lot of suggestions and feedback, and sorry, inputs from different uh, audio content, I started the pre-production. This was quite the big part uh, of the of the of the work that I did, just because it took a lot of effort to learning some new stuff and testing things. But probably this is the part that I enjoy the most. In this stage, my idea was to try to shape a bit better some parts of the or some features about my animation, and in a way that I was trying to define a path that I was looking for. And in order to do that, I sort of like note down the bullet points that I want to identify and to reshape it, like such as the style, the mood, the sequence, and the music slash sound design. And for all these aspects, every time that I was testing or like elaborating idea, I was keep an eye on these to try to see if I could put all these features together in a coherent way. So if the style was coherent with the music, was coherent with the cameras, with the mood, and the intensity of the sequences, just to have like a rough concept in my mind.
Mhm.
And then, of course, based on the idea that I wanted, so based on the inputs that I received, I started collecting references. Of course, this is the parts that it takes a bit of a study, because you have to understand which is a good reference, which is a bad reference, and this is my personal point of looking at. And for example, I started from a wide range of references, start with movies references, advertisement reference, CG references, and just to enlarge my topic awareness. But then I understood that I should drop some of them, because some of them are already like imitating something which is real. So I immediately dropped some CG references, because the start of, I mean, the how they are like trying to act, they are acting as they are real. But of course, there's a sort of a gap. So following references which are CG are always like, you are taking with you that gap of the starting point. And then I start analyzing also the movies references that I firstly thought they were like quite useful. But what I figured out is that movies mostly they are focusing mostly on main characters or hero characters, and car itself is always a sort of like side character. And just for this reason, what I noticed that the camera and how you are moving cameras, how you're portraying the car itself is such as a secondary character, and this is not helping. This was not helping my my scope. And for this reason, I found the advertisements, automotive car, were like these were working way better, just because basically I discovered there are directors for these automotive commercials, and basically they are like trying to enhance and empower the car itself, the shape of them, how they're like moving, and they're like more focused on this character, which is the car. So I found them super helpful to study them.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes total sense.
Yeah, I mean, and I actually, my very first thing was like, okay, I'm gonna follow mostly movies reference, because I thought that that was the way, but then I understood the opposite, so it was quite surprising from my side.
Yeah, yeah, and in this way, you're carrying over the uh, uh, I don't know, the bias that the director of the movie
Exactly,
or the CG
exactly,
has, and you're also translating that into your own work. So it makes total sense. I
exactly. I mean, as you mentioned, I mean, every there is a bias, right? And how the people are like developing their own content is based on the target that you want to kind of match. And of course,
uh
if you are doing an automotive advertisement, you are trying to get that target, and it was
right,
exactly the target that I wanted.
absolutely.
Then I started thinking, okay, we have the idea, the overall idea, we have the sequence more or less in mind about like this directing car sequence animation, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, I thought, okay, shall we develop a bit more the idea of this hero character? And I found after a bit of a time, and this time was like quite a lot actually, I found this Porsche. And I really love that because it has this sort of rocket shape, sort of a vintage shape and taste. But at the same time, I fell in love with it. Of course, I knew that as it was a bit too vintage for my idea, because I wanted something a bit more contemporary. So I started in my mind thinking about how can I restyle it in a light way, so not heavy restyle, but keep the same nature, same curves, but make it like a bit more contemporary. And at this stage, it was quite useful a book that I read for architecture, in which there was a sort of a phrase where this writer was telling that in every object, humankind is trying to see human parts on human body parts. I'm gonna explain myself. For example, in a house, no, but that's true, and that was quite interesting for me when I read that. In a building, for example, in a simple house, for example, we see eyes and one mouth. The eyes are the
Right.
windows, and the mouth is the door.
Oh
And
yeah, yeah.
this was
I've seen those references. Yes.
and it was quite fascinating, because I thought the same from my perspective, that if I want to change the aspect or the how does this car look, I should try to kind of find the most iconic features on this as the eyes, for example, which are the front lights and the back lights. So I started rethinking those mainly, as you can see from this like really early sketch, and from the back and the front of it, and I reshape it in a way that then it was like there was the final result. It was quite just a light restyle, nothing too heavy, but I just slightly changed the backlights, which I
Hmm.
really love, and then I also add a spoiler on the bottom. In this moment, I mean, when I was developing the restyle, I was quite lucky because I went to the Ferrari museum in Modena,
Hmm.
and I was mind blown. I was literally taking pictures about vintage cars and
Yeah,
contemporary cars. And in that moment, I was like, oh, I'm quite lucky because I was literally studying, taking pictures about every sort of angle from these cars, and
yeah.
I felt pretty lucky.
You're talking about being at the right time at the right place. Um,
Absolutely, I was
so
laughing.
clicks.
I was in Ferrari laughing at me. I was like, oh my god, it doesn't make sense. No, well, it was like I was quite lucky.
Right,
And
definitely.
I would like to mention something about the texture itself. I didn't texture it heavily because in my mind, I knew exactly the amount of detail that I needed for the animation. In a way that I
Hmm.
already knew that with a lot of motion blur or camera shake, and with the mood that I was thinking already, the textures and the detail level of detail are not the main character. So I thought that it was like a side factor on this animation, especially because I wanted to make it to keep it as a concept automotive animation. So I didn't put so much effort on that just because I knew that it was like quite useless. So, for example, I thought to start like really going deep on the wheel itself, but then I figured out that it was like quite useless because the wheel itself it was like just something spinning. So I
Yeah,
stopped myself, and this is something that I learned from these mistakes because I mean, you have to always consider which is the level of detail you have to put inside something. Of course, this is like quite banal to say, but I experienced that by mistake because I understood that I was putting too much effort in something that which was quite barely visible.
yeah,
So, and I think that it's something that I learned from this mistake.
yeah. It's always a good reminder to stop and think about where you're going and because sometimes we can drift off if you enjoy something and get a lot
No,
step
absolutely.
make a step back and just see the result.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you're working during evenings, I would say that you have to use your time wisely,
Yes.
not over detailing. Otherwise, you will never finish your personal project. If I would be like alone
Right.
over detailing, no, but it makes sense completely. And
Cool.
immediately after that, I would like to mention that these I was already texturing everything, and I was testing everything in Vantage, because of course I knew that this, for example, is a render from Vantage, and this is a render from Vantage as well, because I thought that it was quite useful already to be aware about the limit and the potential about this program. So I was already testing it. Immediately after this, like texturing project, I was quite anxious to drop these assets into a sort of like mood. So I started drafting. Drafting is a procedure, is a part of our daily workflow in Brick, and I think in most of the archivist companies. And it's quite useful because you're basically like creating a bunch of quick images. They don't need to be extra detailed. It's just like a sort of there should be like a suggestion or like something which is just under detail, but it gives you that feeling. And
Right. Right.
meanwhile, the cool thing is that, and this is related to that sort of circular workflow of creative process that I mentioned really early in the presentation. I was testing the mood with the car, and I was testing also the restyle of the car at the same time. So it was like a sort of like back and forward procedure between Vantage, modeling, and drafting the mood. And it was quite fun because I was modeling with the live link open. So I was literally seeing in real time which was the 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 feeling of the car.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it was also quite useful to drop these assets in Vantage, because immediately after I was starting playing with these assets with the car, and I saw in my mind that it was time to develop the rough concept of the sequences, and I found in my mind that the three stages of my hero character were like quite more than enough. So uh, I would say that I learned from I mean watching some Christopher Nolan movies, that he's always like thinking from, he's not always like, but sometimes it's building his own story based on the ending. And
Right.
this is exactly what I did. I wanted to create a sort of a like uplifting climax, reaching the peak on the tunnel, because it was like in my mind the main idea of like ending shot. So I started from the tunnel and I went back to the highway, and I created three main scenes for that.
Yeah, but that's very cool.
And just because of Vantage, I started like really playing with the assets with the tool. This is something that I'm usually doing a lot. So when I'm testing a new program, I'm playing with it a lot. I know that it's a bit of a time consuming process, because it's not you're just like wasting time like discovering things. But I
Uh-huh.
think that I found it quite useful, especially because when I when I was drafting the mood, I saw that it was like real time. So I just like took some print screen of it, and I developed my rough storyboard,
Yeah,
which was
I was about to ask you actually, and also in a traditional workflow, so to speak, traditional quote unquote. For storyboard, people use drawings typically for this type of purpose, and you have used directly. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like these are not overpainted, or probably just slightly overpainted screenshots from Vantage. So, was there any specific reason for using that?
no the as
Yeah.
you mentioned. I started. I mean, when I'm doing a personal project, I'm usually starting with the storyboard, which has sketches mainly, or probably also like viewport. I'm
Right.
actually, to be completely honest and transparent, I'm not a fantastic hand drawer. So I mean, my hand drawing are like quite terrible. So, and just because this program is quite fast, I found it pretty intuitive to create this storyboard from scratch, because it's fast, and I was literally playing with these assets. So I thought, at this point I'm testing cameras, so I don't need to do
Right.
any sort of like storyboard. It's gonna be already there, because I'm already playing with it. So I don't know if this is gonna be like my future workflow milestone, but I
Hmm.
found it like quite intuitive. Just to be completely honest,
Yeah,
I
I
started.
don't think. Yeah, sorry, I don't think you can always you can always replace the storyboard drawing, because sometimes this requires, if you're going to take snapshots from the program, this means you have to have all the models first. But I really found it interesting that in this particular case, you directly used snapshots from the viewport advantage, rather than drawing that.
Exactly. I would say that is not something that is. I don't know if I will go back to the storyboard, or I will go. I will remain on this Vantage storyboard. I think that it was quite intuitive, and of course, it's like completely subjective. So someone would still prefer to use
Of course,
classic storyboards, I would say. But I
of
found
course,
it
of
like
course.
quite intuitive, just because of the workflow that I was following. So it was
Great.
easy. Immediately after, as I mentioned, I really played with the assets, and with my I kept in my mind to have three main stages, which was the highway, the city, and the tunnel. And based on that, I started building up the city and the scenes. Of course, I bought some assets, and I developed some assets my own. And just because I of course, the cool thing about this job is I'm always thinking that is we are crafters, right? We are digital crafters. And the cool thing is that if you can think about that, you can literally then build it your own, and you can build it your own world based on that. And it's something that is always like I would never get bored about this
Mhm.
crafting aspect of our job. So, for example, on this city, I built up these facades because I knew that I didn't need to highly detail anything, just because of the overall concept of my animation. Because I mean, it's going to be fast, it's going to be like completely blurred, a lot of handshake movements. So I knew that
Mhm.
I didn't want it to put too much effort. So I built up my own textures from scratch. And then this was the mind-blowing part when I started using Vantage. So you have everything open. This is Live Link, and this is a grab viewport that I did. And I dropped everything inside it. I was literally navigating it. I don't have a 3D mouse, but I'm gonna buy it completely in the next future. Because the cool thing is that you can literally, and this is something that I'm currently doing, for example, even nowadays, I'm currently
Mhm.
working modeling, but at the same time, I'm always like keeping my live leak open just because I want to see the result. So I
Right.
can model, but then I'm keeping open the live leak, and I can see everything. This is like, and as you can see now, I can take some screenshots from it, and I can build up my own storyboard with a really
Yeah,
easy
absolutely.
as it is. After this like pre-production phase, which took a while actually, because I was testing, I was experimenting, I was trying to build up my scenes and so on, I started the production phase, which was quite fast actually, because I kind of developed everything that I wanted, and I prepared everything. On this production part, of course, the very first thing that I thought was, okay, shall we rig our hero character? Because of course, it's not gonna be if we are basing. I mean, if we are doing our animation based on a car which is moving fast,
Hmm.
you have to make it look real, or you have to make it look decent at least. So, and this is basically everything about motion. So I started watching tons of references about how a car is moving. I didn't use any script. I know there are a bunch of them, uh,
Hmm.
and but I didn't use them because I wanted to try the old-fashioned way.
You mean Max script scripts
Yeah,
for rigging, right? Yeah,
like exactly. There is a city traffic script which is
right, right. So
really.
so you didn't use those.
No. I know that there are a bunch of them. They are like they are quite expensive. But just because I was rigging one car, I
Right.
thought, should we do it manually? And this is something that I learned from like some interviews that I saw that I watched from Pixar animators. They're like
Mhm.
looking for good references. They're like following them. So what I thought on this car, it was like, okay, shall we analyze how this car is moving? Because based on that, I'm gonna rig it. And so as you can see on this footage, you see that the car is, I mean, the body of the car is shaking. The tires just spinning and turning not more than this. And then there is a direction of the car. So I just analyzed these spots or these milestones in a way that then I
Mhm.
was aware to rig it in this way. So for the car itself, I started. This is just as I did. I knew, I know that there are like a better ways of doing this. This is a quite old-fashioned and savage way of rigging, probably. But this is the way I did at the very first. It was running. It was going pretty well, and I thought, okay, we are not gonna change it. I learned other way of rigging it, but then I thought, okay, next time, next personal project. But basically, what I thought is gonna be one point which is controlling a bunch of other points. This point is going to be called the main point, and linked to it, they're gonna be the others, which is going
Mhm.
to be, for example, one, which is the body shake point, which is controlling how the body is moving, and then the others, which are controlling wheels, basically, how they are spinning and how they are turning, and everything is linked to a path constraint to play
Right.
properly. Pretty basic actually.
Right.
Okay, after
And
the
does this
rigging,
handle? Sorry, does this handle the steering of the wheel, the front wheels as well,
yeah,
or did you do this manually? Like,
no, basically, I started thinking, okay, I started this rigging process pretty early, and I did it manually. Then I figured out there is a new way, another way, but just because for me it was like quite working, I thought that I mean, controlling them manually was more than enough, because from my
Right,
side is
right.
always from my side is always like, which, I mean, the best way is the way that which gives you the best result. And for me, the result that I was getting from it was already quite decent. So it was like overdoing again. So I learned that, but I stick to this quite easy process of rigging just because I was lazy. But uh,
Yeah.
just to be, no, also because I was preparing all the assets, and then I thought, oh, I should
Of course.
re-rig again. It was this is running pretty decently, so I thought, okay, shall we
Right.
stay on this? And
Yeah, yeah.
after this,
After all, you're doing this in your free time, so
no,
yeah,
exactly. The very, I mean, first bullet point is like make things looking good. The second is like don't waste too much time. So, and
absolutely.
the midpoint is the result from my side, from my point of
Great,
view. And
great piece of advice.
then camera study. This was actually the main reason why I started this animation, because I wanted to make something which was quite dynamic and intense. So I started collecting and watching tons of references, references, and I tried to understand which are the main feature which are giving that sort of hyper realistic or realistic feeling to a camera. And I started making some tests out of it. One thing that from my video maker background was quite useful is that I shoot a lot of real footage to downhill skateboarders. I was working for as a freelance, and I was doing downhill skateboard videos in the past. And this is an activity, a sport activity, which is quite intense and fast. So as you can see on this and video that you can see on the top left, this is actual footage that I took, and in this you see already motion blur, camera shake, how the main character is like going outside the frame just because of the hand shake or the personal movement of the camera or of the main subject, main character. So all these features, so like motion blur, hand shake, and how the
Hmm.
person is moving inside the frame, were all features that I discovered to be quite useful, and I wanted to study them and to portray them in my animation. Then I started these new cameras, which are this, for example, pretty basic as you can see. The car itself has been rigged as you saw in the earlier slide. So
Hmm.
just like a path constraint with a bunch of points. And as you can see, the direction but the body of the car are not in the same position, because I study, for example, how a car is drifting to see how it's like going in drift, and how the steering wheels are like running. And based on that, then I created my own path for the camera. So quite easy. I stick the target to the car itself, and I add some noise on that with a different method, but just to create that sort of a handshake. This, for example, another camera that I did, one of the pretty early stage version of those cameras. And as you can
Hmm.
see, there's already like the car which is moving, the body of the car which is shaking and braking and like lifting a bit on the
Yeah,
back,
yeah.
and all the bumpiness of the camera and shake approach. But with this viewport, clay viewport, the biggest issue that I faced is that, okay, I can manage the bump, I can manage a lot of stuff, but unfortunately, I can't manage the shutter speed and the depth of field. I know that, for example, you can export also like depth of field viewport for that, but of course, doesn't have the light, and it doesn't have a lot of features that I wanted to test. So the cool thing is that then with it was like randomly, I had the live link open. I started the preview, but then I suddenly watched the live link. In that moment, I saw that the live link is running. Meanwhile, the viewport from 3ds Max is running, and I was like, okay, it's already giving me a lot of information. So, for example, the lights, how the lights like running on the roof of the car. Of course, this is completely blurred because of the noiser, but at least you see a bunch of stuff inside. And for me, it was quite useful because I was already testing a lot of other features that I wanted to test in real time, which was
Hmm.
quite useful.
Yeah, and I see that the frame rate is actually not that bad. I mean, it seems almost the same as in 3ds Max, even
Exactly.
though.
The frame rate is perfect. It's the same. It's completely the same. It is a matter of like then like as you can see, I tried the denoiser, but it was quite useful and quite good the result as a tester.
Yeah, yeah,
But of
absolutely.
course,
We're
yeah,
talking
of
about
course,
pre-visualization, not of course final quality or anything.
exactly. Instead of like testing it with a graph viewport, I
Right.
was testing with a live link. So different
Absolutely.
tool, but the same reason why I was testing it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And also for this one, I was like playing the preview on this, and on this camera, for example, I wanted to also add a feature about for example, I'm shooting the main character, but the main character is so fast that is xing the frame rate. I mean, the frame of the camera. So just in order to make it like look real or to achieve the result that I wanted, I used Vantage. I used Live Link, as you can see. So I was testing it
Mm-hmm.
real time. Of course, it doesn't give you the high quality shutter speed slash motion blur, but this is something that you can test further with lower sample if you want. But
Yeah.
as a intuitive and interactive way of looking and testing things, this was fantastic, especially because you can literally see how the lights are running in the scene. So if the street lights are like lighting up the scene correctly, how is the frequency of it? And it was something that you can see in 3ds Max.
Yeah. I can imagine this workflow working really good on dual monitor or triple monitor setup,
Exactly.
where you can use the other monitor as a reference monitor where Vantage is doing the rendering, even though a little bit noisy or with a bit of the noiser, but still giving you like a glimpse of what the final lighting is going to be.
Exactly correct. It's not like the proper outcome that you're gonna see, but it's just a glimpse, and it's just like something that you see, and and you see if you are on the good path or not. And this is quite
Yep.
useful, of course, like with a bunch of
Very well
parameters.
said.
Mm.
Of course, yeah.
Uh, After like a bunch of tests that I did, I started, as I mentioned, doing some tests with low samples quality, just because I wanted to try to see how was the shutter speed, how was the depth of field, and so on. And I
Hmm.
started producing a bunch of sequences, as you can see. There are not so many,
Well,
actually.
talking about these takes that you rendered about motion blur and shutter speed, did you have to perform lots of iterations during these previous renderings? And was that time consuming? To get to the
Uh,
what where you needed?
yeah, I would say that, for example, I didn't spend too much time testing different cameras because
Mm,
the final result is a bunch of cameras, not like more than 10, I would say. I don't remember exactly. But I used Vantage mainly because of the fast iteration that you can have. Try to nail those aspects that you may, or those features that you mentioned, so shutter and motion blur. And for each camera, when I understood that that camera was good, I was trying to nail those features. So trying to
mhm,
find which, I mean, those things basically are the cool thing about real cameras. So how are unprecise? So how is unprecise the shutter? How is unprecise the depth of field? And all
right.
these things, little things, all these features are the thing that I was looking at. And Vantage gave me the chance to make a fast iteration based on that. So, for example, I did iWay number one because I really love the camera already. And after like two/three iteration of the same camera, I found the good amount of motion blur that I wanted. But the cool thing is that it was quite fast. So like I mean,
Right.
decently fast in a way that I could test a bunch of shots in a day with my own computer. So, and that was quite useful because more iteration, more means more accuracy from my side.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
if I can test more, I can be more accurate about the things that I want to portray in
Yeah.
general.
We know. The more iterations you get, the better the end result because you can test it and see it.
Exactly. You
Make
can see that, you can watch that, you can bring it to after, see how does it look like. You can stretch it, squeeze it, and then go back on
right.
Vantage and so on.
After Effect, that is. Yes, yes, I can see now.
Exactly. Exactly. I'm using After Effects. A bunch of people asking why I'm using it. Uh, I'm using it mainly because the most flexible, especially for small project as it is. I mean, as Spectre is, I can be flexible in a way that I can do a lot of comp or effects already there, and I quite it really useful. That it fits me. It fits my workflow. As you can see, then I did my sound design on top of it based on the sequences that I developed. I used the music that I wanted, and then I used just one eight one two three four five six eight sequences, not more than this, to create
Right.
my animation.
But it
And
tied perfectly. So yeah, kudos for that.
yeah,
I think the sound to video mix, or the sound edit, the sound design was really well done.
I it took 2 nights more or less, the sound design,
Right.
but just because I was so aware about all the sounds that a camera is doing, the
Mm-hmm.
change of gear and the drifting, that I was quite already aware about what I wanted to do.
Right.
And then, for example, this is the final result about a camera. You already watched it on YouTube probably, but I'm looping it just because I would like to mention some little things that I try to mainly focus on. So basically, as you can see, there's a huge amount of like handshake movement of cameras, which are giving you this handshake and sketchy way of filming things.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, a lot of good amount of motion blur that I nailed with Vantage and a bunch of iterations. But then, as you can see, there is a sort of like uh, blurriness. It seems
Uh-huh.
that the autofocus is not working sometimes. It's like, bam, it's like losing the control of the spot that it
Yeah.
needs to be on focus. And
Yeah.
I
I
did
see.
that. I did that because sometimes I saw that the autofocus on some shots of the cameras of the car, which is going so fast, the camera itself, the real camera, is not taking the focus on the object. So I tried to do also that thing, because it
Right.
was like that imperfection that I noticed on some shots, and I thought, okay, I want to use it. And
Right.
also,
Right. So
for
sorry,
this one,
sorry about that. Yeah, I just wanted to say that here again, the references and the suggestions that you were talking about are play really key role, really important role of getting these all these subtle things. And actually, as I'm looking at this shot, I was realizing the overall feel of the whole film is really dynamic. And I wanted to ask you about how did you achieve this? What was the workflows that you used to get to this level of dynamics?
sure. I mean, as you mentioned, references are the key, because the good thing about knowing which reference that you need is just because now it gives you a better quality output. So in order to do that, you have to really be aware about which are the references that you have to follow and you have to pick. So, and that means a bit of um, a kind of topic awareness. So
Hmm.
after that you understood which are the good references, you are starting producing the scenes as I did. After a bunch of iteration in Vantage, for example, I went back to I went to After Effects, and
Hmm.
with that, for example, I was sketching the blur of the camera caused by the autofocus, which was not working, for example, on this part.
Hmm.
And based on that, I was going back to Vantage and fixed everything in 3D based
Uh-huh.
on the reference that I was nailing in After Effects. So it was like a blend procedure between looking at reference, sketch it on Vantage, make it look good, then going to After Effects, seeing which are the good things that you could improve a bit more, and then I went back to Vantage. So it was like a back and forth procedure until a point that the full sequence, I mean the full shot, was already looking good in 3D without any adjustment in uh, in After Effects.
Right,
That was the
right.
kind of procedure I followed.
And here again, we can see that the more iterations you can do, the faster you get to the result. And
Exactly,
mhm,
exactly. Try to imagine that I was testing it in Vantage, but then I went to After,
right,
and then I went to Vantage, and of course, less time means more iteration, and it means
absolutely.
also like less effort that you are putting
I,
something that it's just like for fun.
yeah,
And for
I love
example,
I love this shot. Sorry.
yeah, Yeah, I would say that this is one of my favorite because it's not probably it's quite dynamic, and this is the thing that I mentioned earlier. I drop the bound point on the target, and as you can
Mhm.
see, the car, as soon as reaching you, or as soon as it's getting close to you, the camera
Yeah,
is a sort of like have a bump, and it feels like that
absolutely.
the cameraman is having like a bit of a trouble keeping the camera close to him. So and I felt I did it some. I mean, I was doing it when I was shooting my friend's wall downhill on a
Right.
skateboard. So I thought that could be something that could be useful.
Wow. Real
So
life reference paying
yeah,
back.
yeah, exactly. A lot of background for me was quite useful, to
Yeah,
be
you
honest.
gotta protect the cameraman.
And exactly, because it costs a lot, especially lenses.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, they're more expensive. Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. So, and I think that honestly, this personal project was quite fast because it took like more or less 1 month and a half. But I really
Wow.
enjoyed it so much be, because it was a really good testing uh, task for me. It was
Hmm.
challenging, and it, the outcome itself was reaching my expectation in a way. So I would say
Right.
that I was quite happy about the result. But of course, I personally believe that other people can do even better than me. So I can't wait to see
Yeah.
like other fantastic animation out of that.
That is very humble of you to say, but yes, I also think that you can inspire actually a lot of other artists to follow the lead and again try and give a something more artistic to the world.
Yeah,
All
I think
right.
that's the simple
Yeah.
thing is that I would rewatch this video in the future in a different way and gonna say, "Oh, dude, this is really terrible," because oh my god, I did that. No, why I did that? And because it's always thing. I mean, after a bunch of years, you're always watching what you did in a way that I was
Yes.
young. So, but I think it is a good. It was a good experience.
I think everyone can say this for themselves. Reflecting back on something they did. You wish you were better. You can do it a bit better. But I think this is a part of the learning process. And in that regard, thank you for sharing your learning process with us and everyone here. I think that was really exciting. I'm sure everyone got a great overview of what you did to get there, how you combined your experience, your past to get to this point, and also the process of studying references. I think, yeah, I think that was really valuable. So we are actually at the end of the presentation, and we now have questions from the viewers. So I suggest we answer those.
Perfect.
What do you say?
Yeah.
All right. So let me just try and check here on my notes. Right. Okay. So one of the questions that we also wanted to. Okay. So do you have any special place where looking for reference imagery?
Okay, good question. Good question. I
Hmm.
think that it depends in a way that, for example, if it's, I mean, talking about images still, so I'm mostly
Hmm.
looking for something which is, it doesn't, I would say that is not about where, but it's about how you choose your references. And for these, there are like a bunch of websites. I'm always like thinking in a more natural way of like looking for
Hmm.
flat images, or not flat images, but not too graded, color corrected images. Based on, I mean, for the animation itself, it depends as well. The thing that I'm currently doing is that I'm watching and spending a lot of time watching YouTube or Vimeo, and I'm always like trying to subscribe to a lot of channels that I personally love or that I personally think that could be useful in the future. So when I'm looking for references, I'm always thinking in a way that okay, uh, I'm always like collecting ideas and always collecting references, and
Hmm.
it depends which is the topic that you want to portray. But basically, I'm always trying to find good references on web, or sometimes I'm also filming them if I can.
Right, right.
Because for example, if you want to have like some reference about a car, two options: you can literally go on YouTube, or you can go and see like a car running, right?
Yep,
These are
absolutely.
same things. And maybe the footage that you are shooting is even better because it's like without any editing, so you see everything like clearly.
Hmm,
I
hmm.
really hope that I answered the question.
Yep, I think they do. And here is an extension on my end to this question. Do you have any special tricks, like, to specifically analyze, like, for example, do you time the shots exactly to the second, uh, or do you kind of, measure with visual aids, composition and stuff like that? Do you have any kind of tools that help you be more analytical, more technical, or you
Mm.
just use your eye side, so to speak?
So is a really good question, and unfortunately, I think that is a part of the process that you have to learn about what you need to pay attention on. So just to like as an example, automotive car animation, you need to understand which are the main features about something that gives you the feeling about speed, right? And in order to
Hmm.
do that, you have to kind of wash your brain and rethink, okay, which are the main features? And starting from that, you are watching tons of videos. And after, I would say, 10 videos, 10 footages, and concept or whatever, I literally took note about, okay, there are something which is in common. So, for example, is in common the motion blur. Got it.
Yeah.
There is in common between these 10 advertisements, the handshake. Got it.
Hmm, hmm.
So I took note just
Check.
because exactly. So I think that probably in the next personal project I would do differently. But the thing that I'm always trying to think is that, okay, shall we analyze references in a way that I need to be the nature? I need to understand the nature of it. So if the nature of that camera movement is about like portraying intensity, I
Hmm.
need to see which are the features which are helping that camera to be intense. So how is
Right.
the movement? How is the camera? How is the background? How is the foreground moving? And I'm literally analyzing everything that I could possibly catch and steal from that shot.
Right. Right. Okay. All right. So let me have a look at another question. Uh, Another question that we got here. Right. So, what was your actually what was your light setup? Was there anything special that was not that obvious? Something different.
This is something that I learned because I saw some mock-ups into the automotive still images production, and basically I'm gonna reshare my screen if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Please do.
Let me, okay, because basically what I understood is that when you are doing automotive, uh, what I learned from analyzing a bunch of other references is that they are lighting up the scene in a way that they are literally trying to highlight a lot of different parts of the car. And as you can see on this shot, there are a bunch of statics lights which I used for the scene. But then I wanted to have a light which was kind of highlight the roof of it to better
Hmm.
highlight the shape of it of the car. So as you can see, there are a bunch of lights which are following the car,
Hmm.
and I will show you the result. But the reason why the reason because of I did that is just because I needed to have a sort of a constant illumination on
Hmm.
some
Hmm.
parts of the car just to better emphasize the shape of it. And as you can see on
Right.
this shot, for example, the roof of it has been
Hmm.
highlighted, or even on this one has been
Yeah.
highlighted,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
because black on black was disappearing. So I need
Of
to
course.
play to place a light on that, just because in that way I was able to emphasize those shapes.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. To get the silhouette and the
Exactly.
contour visible at all times.
Exactly, and this is something that I noticed that even in automotive photography, they are currently
Mm,
doing. They're like
right.
distributing a lot of soft lights and softbox. So I
I
learned from
wonder
that.
I wonder if they can do that in moving cameras as well, and
No,
some how
exactly.
with cranes or something.
No, exactly, exactly. I was
All right.
wondering why.
Yeah, thank you. That was a good trick here to link the lights. One might find it's a little bit artificial, but whatever does the job and whatever makes it feel good.
Exactly.
Okay, here we have another question. Did you have to change settings in Vantage? Was it easy to set it up, or did you do anything special there?
Actually, I was not really. I found it quite intuitive because it's basically an IPR more or less. I mean, as
Hmm.
I used it, I think. I mean, there are a bunch of different aspects that I didn't use or stretch into this animation, but I
Right,
knew that I could have done different way, or I could have done
right,
other
right.
things in it.
Mm.
I tested also some fog in it, which was cool, but I wanted to keep it like pitch dark, for example. But I test that, and
Hmm.
basically I was just rendering as it was. I mostly use it as a IPR with that sort of a IPR
Right,
approach. But now I'm testing the new version, and I'm a bit like more experimenting on that.
right, right. Okay. All right, we have an interesting question that is targeted towards you. It's hello Andrea. I have a question: how to lower VRAM memory for rendering in Chaos Vantage? But maybe I can assist here as well. Do you have any tips first?
No, please go for
No,
it.
not really. Right, right. So, um, okay, so we currently um, try to utilize as much memory as possible for speed efficiency. This is the short answer is that Vantage tries to occupy to fit the whole scene in the memory of the GPU. And the scene actually is comprised of geometry and textures for the materials. There's also, of course, lights and materials, but these are really, really small in the footprint on the memory. So if we take a look at the geometry, if you're typically using Vantage to render large scenes poly count wise, there are things that you can do as in any regular ray tracer. Remember, Vantage is 100% ray tracer, even though real time, but it's just a ray tracer, or it works just like a ray tracer. Um, Sorry, I'm just babbling now. So yeah, if you have a lot of polygons, what you can do is try to use instances where possible. This is valid for any ray tracer, as I said. And on the texture side, um, you can try to resize the textures, just so that they don't occupy that much memory. And this is a somewhat destructive process, so we are going to handle this very, very soon. We're currently developing an automatic map and resizing functionality that will actually make it that um, uh, Vantage will recalculate or calculate automatic map sizes for map maps for all the textures, and load only those that are needed, so that you don't get waste, or so that you just load the texture that is needed for memory. So this is on the roadmap. So stay tuned. But until this time, you can probably, if you know if you really have to do it now, you can probably manually resize these textures. But again, stay tuned. We are really close to releasing this new feature. And we also, one other addition here, we realized that in many of the cases, textures are a lot more, um, uh, impactful on the memory footprint. Of course, other methods that are not very applicable are to get more or GPU with more memory, but that is not always a viable solution. One last thing that you can also try is if you're rendering at a larger resolution, you can try lowering that a bit because the frame buffer of Vantage also takes some memory, and also turning off features like light cache could also shrink down the memory size. And we have a memory estimation in the rendering window that you can use to see how much memory you're going to save. And yeah, sorry about this long description, but it's rather a technical topic, so hopefully that explains it. Okay, we have another question which is related to your hardware. What hardware did you use, Andrea? Do you use NVIDIA RTX 3090?
No, unfortunately, I would love to have it. Unfortunately, I have just I'm humble and I'm using a 3070. It's more than enough, but it depends, of course, how big is your scene. As you mentioned,
Of
Simeon, it's
course.
like a matter of like maps. I discovered myself the same. So, but my one, I mean, the one that I'm using is 3070 Tough Gaming RTX from NVIDIA. It's
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
it's good. My dream is like the RTX 3090 for
Of
sure.
course. Of course, yes. But they're also difficult to come by,
Mm,
somewhat difficult to come by. But
that's right.
hopefully, the new generation is going to come soon, so we can all have more, uh, supply. All right. So in this train of thought, can you recall how much time did you need to render the sequence, or how much per frame?
Okay, it depends. For example, at the very early stage when I was testing the motion blur, it took,
Mm-hmm.
I would say, like 15 minutes for maximum for each sequence to be rendered. By lowered,
Each each sequence. Cool.
yeah, but they are like 70 frame sequences,
Right.
so
Right.
they're
But
not insanely high as a frames, right? But
hmm
still, I just lowered down a lot of the samples just to have like a quick test about how was the camera shake, how was the depth of it, how was the motion blur.
Right.
But
Right.
this is for the early process, for the early stage. But
hmm
then it was taking several hours to make it look really good, really good. So
Right.
I would say 4 hours
hmm
maximum for each sequence. But really, high level of probably then I discovered that I could have done like lower as a samples, but I wanted to be like I wanted to exaggerate, and so I
Right.
think that, for example, 1,000 samples are already like fantastic. I
Right.
put like 2,500, but just because
Okay. Okay.
yeah, I was exaggerating.
Right. So basically, you use Vantage as a heavy production raster, ray tracer,
Yeah.
like a production render.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it depends, but
Yeah.
for my personal project, yeah, I would do it for sure.
Right. Right. And correct me if I'm wrong. You said 15 minutes. That means that by the time you take a cup of coffee
Yeah,
or something like that,
yeah, yeah.
you
No,
you are able to.
no. The thing was that, for example, this was like, just to be honest, and this happened for real. I was testing it, so I
hmm
was literally testing the one sequence that I push render,
hmm
and
hmm
I went to the kitchen. I was like doing my coffee. But okay, I took a coffee. I was like scrolling Instagram for a while, but then I came back and it was like done. So I was like, okay, this is something to consider when you are testing, because this means a
Right.
lot of iterations. So I was like, okay, that means that I could do this project really
Mm,
in a snap of a finger. So
right. Right.
and it,
And
that
it
was that was fantastic.
and it also makes you stand up from the computer, which is um, professionalists or professional doctors say that it's healthy. So
Exactly, pretty
we
healthy.
should all find
Yeah.
time to do that. Okay, but jokes aside, here's another question. Did you render in Vantage with black background and composite in After Effects?
No, I mean, it was just like I drop inside a scene without light. So it was just like an empty scene with just the
hmm
spotlight that
hmm
I wanted to have it. Now you have
Right.
the feature that you can render it without, I mean, the PNG alpha or without alpha. but
Mm-hmm.
for my purpose, it was not like full black, but almost full black. So
Right.
I wanted to have like a dome, which was almost close to black as a
Mm-hmm.
color,
Mm-hmm.
with a bit of intensity. But I use it a proper dome for that, especially because it was
Right.
pitch black. So
Yeah. Yeah. It makes sense.
mm.
Okay, got it. So do you prefer using Chaos Vantage or V-Ray for the final production render? That's a tricky one.
It is a tricky one. Just to be completely transparent, Vantage still has some things which are missing from the classic V-Ray. So it depends. So for example, for my personal project, I would probably stick to Vantage because of like render times, and also you have to kind of understand which are the things which are missing in Vantage now,
Hmm. Hmm.
which I suppose they're gonna be like further add in the future. But now, if I have something which is not like running perfectly, I'm just like approach this problem with a kind of smart solution to avoid that. So of course, you I mean, for textures, probably I would still stick to V-Ray sometimes.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
now that, for example, some features have been had, I think that it's not going to be a long time until we are going to reach the same quality. So no, but because of for example, a new feature like the V-Ray edge text that's been had, and I was like, okay, so this is a
Yeah.
cool feature that was waiting, and that means that others are going to be had, and there are like a bunch of them which are missing. The rest is like already running. So it
Right.
depends. I think that literally it depends on which project you're gonna handle, and so I'm
Right.
using both, just to be
Depending
honest.
on,
So
yeah,
depending
yeah,
exactly.
depending on the project. I see. Okay, thanks. Thanks for, of course, we appreciate you being honest, and this is the actually the most important bit. We know that Vantage doesn't support all the features, and we're
Mm.
working to adding as much as we can. But guys, I just wanted to add a little bit on that comment here. We really want to keep Vantage as a real-time renderer, and adding more production features are going to slow down the rendering. So we're kind of very careful when picking up which features we want to add, and how to add them so that we can be as fast as possible, and still keep Vantage being real time, because yeah, we believe this is one of the biggest benefits that Vantage can provide. Okay, so going with the next question is, what very feature did you miss the most? Again, this is very connected. Did you so which what very feature did you miss the most when working in Vantage? Assuming there are features Vantage doesn't yet support, and yes, there are features that Vantage doesn't support.
Yeah, uh, I would say that first of all, I was quite surprised about all the amount of feature that was like already running, and
Mm-hmm.
from the very first version that I used, which was the very first one.
Mm-hmm.
The difference from the first one, the new one that I'm using, it's insanely big. I mean, the difference in a really
Mm-hmm.
good way. And no, but for example, the only thing which for me was like quite heavy to handle, it was the displacement. But then, of course,
Yeah.
this is a feature that if you know exactly that feature, it's really important for you. There's always a way to kind of avoid that. So you're gonna,
Mm-hmm.
of course, it's gonna cost a bit of a GPU. But for
Mm-hmm.
foreground, you can use like the real displacement. Of course, it's gonna
Mm-hmm.
increase the polygons. We know
Yeah.
that. But if you still want to do that, of course, you can't use a displacement for further details. But this is always like a good balance between foreground elements and background elements. So, for example, the
Mm-hmm.
displacement was something that I completely avoid using proper displacement when I
Right.
really need it. The V-Ray blend material, but then of
Mm-hmm.
course you need to think in a way, in a more savage way. Instead of blend material, you can use composites.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's always like, okay, this is not supported so far. We will see in the future, but until then, we
Yeah.
can try to do it like in a more savage way, and it's working.
Right.
So you have to
Absolutely.
think think how the program is working, and then you can play
Mm-hmm.
that. And also now that I'm testing a bunch of other application, for example, now Typho is running a lot of fun animation things are running, and so
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I see
Yeah.
really a lot of pros instead of cons using Vantage now.
Absolutely. Yeah, and Tyflow is really great too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shout out to Tyson. He's doing a great job here. All right,
Thank
so
you.
thanks for sharing that. There also we can yeah, we are, of course, guys, we are trying to add the features that you will need for your daily work. And as Andrea said, you can try and work around for some of the features that we haven't yet supported, or we haven't added support yet. But yeah, rest assured, both displacement and blend materials are on the roadmap. We're just figuring out how to add them without performance loss, too much of a performance loss, and of course, memory footprint. Okay, and then do you have multiple projects running? How do you not get lost in a project? Wow, that's a really cool question.
This is a really good question. This is a really good question, and I had the same problem, and sometimes I still have the same problem. And just to be completely honest, I was watching a Ashtorp interview,
Mm-hmm.
and he said something that it really hit me and was like, okay, that could be a way. And he said literally that he's running multiple of them, and he's always like jumping from one to another. And I didn't understand at the very first why he meant that, but why he mentioned that. But then I understood that now, for example, I am running a bunch of at least two projects plus one third,
Mm-hmm.
which is I'm still like kind of developed. But is every sort of like project runs in a his own way, I would say. But you can stop and pause, freeze it as you are a bit tired or a bit lost, and start the other one,
Mm-hmm.
and in a way that every time that you are thinking to another project, you are learning something, you are seeing something different, and then maybe something that you are developing for the other project is going to be useful for for the other one that you stopped. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
every project that you are running is always, even if it's not 100% clear at the very first stage, is always helping you to develop better the other project or the other project as well. So it's like, don't be, I mean, schedule them. I mean, I'm scheduled them. At least I don't have probably like deadlines, strict deadlines, because those are projects that I'm trying to deal with myself.
Yeah.
But every time that I'm doing them, I can completely stop, and I know that when I'm jumping into another one, I'm gonna discover something that is gonna be useful. It's like communicating glasses, which are like kind of working together in a way.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
this is
Well,
personal.
no, it was very insightful. I think it's useful um, for us. Okay, then we have what's the final duration of the render output in Chaos Vantage? The final duration, I would say, I don't know.
Like time that
I would
probably,
I would assume so. Yes, I would assume frames or time.
yeah.
How long was the whole thing?
Uh, I don't know. So it depends. As I mentioned, it depends. For example, if it's like the early stage, if it's the final. For
Mm-hmm.
the render output, maybe I can answer that. I launched only one sequence. I rendered just like one sequence every evening, just because I was like, okay, grab a coffee
Yeah,
or grab
yeah,
a glass of water. You can chill a bit, and then you are like trying to check if everything is looking good, and then you launch it. And then I went to bed. So I would say that it took uh, 7 days more or less, 8 days
mm-hmm.
more or less. But considering just the evenings that I spent,
Mm-hmm.
so not so much, because if you consider that all those 8 shots with all the iterations has been made in 8 evenings, more or less,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I would
Mm-hmm.
say that it's quite surprising, especially if it's like a proper it's a full animation. Even if it's just like a quick animation, I did it in 8 days.
Right,
So
right.
I don't know if I'm answering to the question. So if it's a time per day, I would say like this, as
Yeah.
I said. But if it's time per frame, I would say like 5 3 minutes for
Right.
frame. It depends about the
Mm-hmm.
samples probably.
Okay. Okay. All right. And what was the post-production workflow?
Okay, this is a good one. um on this one I didn't put so much effort in that because I was trying to be already tidy and precise in a in raw render. But the
Mm-hmm.
thing that I, for example, saw, and it's something that I'm still using it quite often, is that some features of a camera,
Mm-hmm.
which are, for
Mm-hmm.
example, a bit of deformation. If you see the VFX breakdown about the movies, they are like starting from flat and then are like a bit deforming the image, spread it, and then adding a
Mm-hmm.
bit of chromatic aberration. I saw that. I was like, okay, I think I'm gonna try to imitate or at least to test it in a way that I'm gonna learn from it. So the
Yeah.
post production that I mainly did was that probably stretch it or squeeze it a bit, the sequence of it, or I mean the time of that sequence, and then I add some like vignetting a bit
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and a chromatic aberration and deformation. Nothing more
Right.
than this.
Okay. All done in After Effects, I guess, after
Yes,
the
yes,
rendering. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we have a question for the animation. Are you using Live Link with Max, or do you export the animation and render from Vantage? And then the user continues, I'm using Cinema 4D and there doesn't seem to be a live link render option. When I export animations, I run into issues. The files seem to be very heavy. So there are two parts of this questions. I guess, Andrea, can you answer the first one? Are you using the
exactly.
live rendering live link directly from Max or?
Yes, yes, because I
Okay.
saw that it's like the best way instead of like
Right.
I mean time consuming. I don't need, I mean live link is running
Mhm.
fantastically and I don't need to export anything, so I don't
Right.
see from my side, I don't see any point of like exporting it. Of course if you
Mhm.
want to use other features about Vantage you can do that, but mostly because I'm animating everything in 3D
Mhm.
in a in a in 3D Max,
Right.
I'm
Right.
using live link. But I sometimes I'm using it to play for example with characters. I'm adding elements with Chaos Cosmo inside. So it
Mhm.
depends which are why should I use one or the other. It depends on the project, but I'm mostly using live
Right.
link.
Okay, okay, good answer. And Toby, want to continue with the answer. Yes, there is no live link render animation directly from Cinema 4D. The guys at Viri for Cinema 4D are working on this. They will add that as soon as it's ready. But in the meantime, if we can do something about that, if you can contact us on the forums or on the support, it would be better if you contact us on the forums, on the Chaos Vantage forums, so that we can have a look at any issues that you might have. But yes, typically VR scenes become larger when they're animated because all the animation data is inside of the VR scenes. But again, if it becomes too heavy, we should have a look at that. We have other questions here. That was that okay? So there are there any plans on making Chaos Vantage compatible with Chaos Corona render? Any news on the Corona support? Currently, the so if you mean compatibility with live linking, this is a difficult one since Chaos Vantage is using a technology that Corona doesn't currently support. So yeah, this we can't progress that much on this end. And yeah, the Corona guys have to address some technical limitations first, and then we can have this. For live linking, and then for scenes, again, I would say that once Corona is uh, well, they can actually make sorry, there are two ways we can go there. One is the currently available option that you can open up a scene and use the converter to convert the materials, the corona materials to VRE1s. And I'm aware that there's some loss using this process. So whenever you encounter a missing feature, let us know so that we can improve the converter. And the other option would be for Vantage can read those directly. All of these are options that we're looking onto. Maybe we find yet another option. So yeah, stay tuned. Can you have an animated GIF or GIF as a part of screen render in Vantage? This is an interesting question. So not at this time. You can directly capture to MP4, and that would be the quickest way for you to generate a small video. So no GIF, unfortunately. But maybe we can think about that and add it as an option. All right. If you let us know on the Chaos forums again the use case, what would be, because GIF can't have different frame rates, different options. It would be more beneficial for us to know what the use case is so that we can accommodate properly. Then another question is, can you do animated TV and apply it as a texture and render it in Vantage? This is on the to-do roadmap, on the to-do list, on the roadmap. The way you're going to be able to do it is with image file list, so a sequence of images, and you'll be able to assign this, for example, in 3ds Max or any other in the VR scene, and then Vantage is going to read that and change it every frame. Can you render ID in Vantage, or can you do render ID or wire render or Cryptomate? Okay, so not at the moment. We're working on adding these render elements masks. So stay tuned. However, the Cryptomate is going to be not in the first edition or in the first version of this feature. It's a bit more complicated to have Cryptomat, and also it takes a whole it increases the memory consumption when rendering. So yeah, we'll leave that for a bit later on. What about VR? If you test in real time in Vantage, I'm not really sure how to interpret this question. So currently we have, if I freely try to interpret, do we support a HMD device directly rendering from Vantage? Not at the moment. We know that Vantage cannot deliver the full frame rate, 90 frames per second, so that the viewer can avoid nausea or dizziness. And we're working on ways to make Vantage faster so that we can get to these frame rates. And once we feel that Vantage is comfortable at achieving these rates, then we will probably add these features. But as of this time, please use the spherical or cubical panorama renderings. And then we have, I think, actually that was everything. Sorry, there is one other question, one of the last ones. So since you animated everything in 3ds Max and used only, I believe this is for Andrea. So since you animated everything in 3ds Max and used only LiveLink to work, how did you render this in Vantage? Did you export for rendering?
So basically, I'm currently using the fourth button of Vantage. I mean, when you're like importing the Vantage plugin, you have the fourth one. And basically, I'm opening the live link, I'm checking everything which is running. And the cool thing is that if I'm animating everything into 3ds Max with live link, I can see exactly how does it look like. And after that, I can push the fourth button, which it's literally rendering. Exactly, the fourth
live
one.
link, export, import, and then the live link render animation. Yeah, on the toolbar.
Exactly. The fourth one is my favorite one. You can click it and you can have, and then you have your render done. And the cool thing is that I'm literally testing everything for personal project and like proper project. And the cool thing is that you can animate a lot of stuff that I didn't even think that could have been animated. and then with the render from live link, everything that you
Yeah.
see moving in live link is going to be rendered and animated. So I'm using that button, and with that
Mhm.
you have the entire sequence with all everything that you animated, with also
Yeah.
every animations process here.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So yes, again, Manik, I believe, is the name. Right. So make sure that you check our documentation, and we do offer the this option there. Okay. So we have to wrap up, guys. So um, we will start taking note of these questions and answer those in the comments, because we don't want to take this much time. Andrea is probably very tired now. Uh, so thank you for all the questions, and we'll try to also get back on the forums with those questions, or here as well. We will again leave those as a comments here. But it's getting late, so we will need to really wrap it up. All right. So thank you, Andrea, for for the awesome presentation, all the insights that you gave us. I really found it inspiring, and I'm sure lots of our users can say the same thing. So, for those of you on the webinar who may have not yet tested Vantage, you can grab a free 30-day trial from our website. Just go to chaos.com/vantage, and you will get started in no time. Also, you can follow me on my YouTube channel to always be up to date with the latest Vantage updates. I do these videos there where I show you what's latest, and I also do some useful tutorials that I'm preparing currently, and I'll be putting those out. So I'll make sure that some of those questions be addressed there as well. To keep content up to date, and so that you can guys continue doing your work. Just type Simeon Balabanov, that's my name, in YouTube in the search box, and make sure you hit the subscribe button. And yeah, I think that's it. Thanks everyone for joining us. Thank you for your questions. It's been lovely. Thanks, Andrea. Again, thank you for your time. Thank you for your insight. It was all pleasure. Goodbye and take care, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Thank you again.